So through integration of non-traditional sensors as well as commercial sensors, we are getting better at space domain awareness. But as the congestion in space continues to grow, we will need better capabilities.
Well, you mentioned the expertise of the personnel who work at Space Force, and I understand that you have been successful in hiring a number of civilians to address the milestones that you've set. That's why I continue to be concerned about the proposed relocation of Space Force to the Redstone Arsenal. When the Missile Defense Agency was relocated to Alabama, they lost 80% of their workforce who didn't want to leave and make that move. What would be the impact if you lost a significant portion of the workforce in a move of Space Force?
Well, Senator, so today, as I mentioned, I've got, the command itself right now is about 62% if I count military as well as Department of the Air Force civilians. I've got a contractor base too, in addition to that pulls us up a little bit over 80% in the total for the command. There's really no way to know how many of those civilians would move to Huntsville, for example, until that decision is made. Lots of those folks are great civilian workforce. They have made life choices, and that's why they live, for example, in Colorado Springs. The military, we're soldiers, sailor, airmen, Marines, and Guardians. If told to move, we'll move. But there's really no way of knowing what percentage would actually move.
But the report that took a look at the spacing decision makes some assumptions about what would happen if there were a move and what the impact of that would be. Is that correct?
Yes.
And is there a reason why that report is not available to the public?
I believe the Department of the Air Force, the Secretary of the Air Force is doing some additional analysis before he makes his final decision. But to your point, ma'am, I would just offer that whether it's Colorado Springs or Huntsville, I think both those locations have the talent pool, if you will, of professionals, space professionals that could support the mission of U.S. Space Command. So again, I wouldn't know the percentage, but I do know that the workforce that's available in Huntsville is very good as well.
But am I correct that the workforce in Huntsville has not had the same expertise on operating satellites that the workforce in Colorado has had?
Well, so the workforce that I have, ma'am, in the headquarters itself, the COCOM headquarters, we don't necessarily do that level of technical flying the satellites, if you will. That is resident within subordinate units within U.S. Space Command, and those units are not moving.
So they will stay in Colorado regardless?
I'm sorry?
They will stay in Colorado regardless of what happens with everybody else?
So the only part of that basing decision that's under review right now for a decision to relocate is the headquarters, my headquarters.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen. Senator Fisher, please.
General Dickinson, I guess my question to you is on the space race. I do feel like whether it was the Chinese spy balloon, whether it's the fentanyl that's been mentioned, TikTok, the public is becoming much more aware right now, in real time, the real threat that China poses. I mean, they are not messing around. They mean business. And I'm a new member here, and the briefings that we've had in my 2 months here are sobering in many ways. That is will be, continue to be a big focus of mine and my office, is to make sure that we're doing everything we can to be ready to challenge that threat. I guess Senator Scott asked the question about what we can do. I want to drill down on that a little bit more. Specifically, what are 2 or 3 things that you don't think, from a space perspective, you don't think that the public might be aware of as it relates to China in space that are terrifying?
A couple of things. If you just look at the sheer number of launches, space launches that they do in a year, that is a statistic that most people don't know. So I'll give you a statistic there. So In 2022, last year, there were 186 space launches. Of those, 64 were Chinese. U.S. was 87. They were at 64. So just putting things on orbit, whatever they may be. They have rounded out their equivalent of our GPS satellite network. They call that the BeiDou. So they have accurate position navigation and timing capabilities worldwide. If you look at the just the sheer number of satellites that are in orbit and what their intended use is, everything from ISR satellites to communication satellites to PNT satellites. So they are moving in a direction where they want to be a peer to us in terms of capabilities in space. We are still the best in space, but what we need to make sure is that that gap does not close and that we continue to keep the gap or increase it.
Senator Tuberville, please.
Thank you, Chairman Reed. Generals, thanks for being here, and service for all of you here in this room today. General Dixon, I know you talked about Skylink a little bit in Ukraine. Give your personal assessment of really how that's worked for Ukraine and for all of us in the future.
Thank you, Senator. So I think the lessons that I take from watching that capability by the Starlink capability is I think it demonstrates what those large constellations can provide in terms of thousands of satellites providing a service or a capability to a certain entity. In this particular case, Ukraine, I think shows the maturation, if you will, of our commercial space industry and able to build something as technically sophisticated as that on scale and put it on orbit and maintain it. I think that is a big lesson learned or a takeaway for me from the Ukraine-Russia conflict.
Thank you. General Cotton, a lot of people talk about tactical nuclear weapons but don't know what that really means. If Putin were to use a tactical weapon in Kyiv, what damage would that do and what would be the fallout?
Sir, so when we talk about non-strategic nuclear weapons, just for a definition, non-strategic nuclear weapons are any weapons that are currently not under the New START treaty. So for Russia, that's approximately 2,000 weapons. For the effects, would like to hold off and have that answered to you during the closed session, if we could.
Okay, thank you very much. General Dixon, it probably wouldn't be, it'd be unfitting for me not to ask you about Space Command in your last hearing here, since the senator from New Hampshire brought it up a little bit. You know, we've heard a lot about, in the last few years, about basing the decision of the command headquarters. I didn't want to get back into this back and forth decision, but when my colleagues bring it up, I want to make sure the facts are correct. General, in 2019, the Air Force identified 6 suitable locations for Space Command. Is that correct? In 2020, when the Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, testified before this committee, he instructed the Air Force to allow for communities to self-nominate. That resulted in the Air Force examining 66 communities across 26 states, correct?
As best I can recall.
It was an exhaustive selection process that weighed 21 different factors and involved site visits, interviews, inputs from up and down the chain of command. That process took 8 months, correct?
As best I can recall.
Thank you. Which community ranked number one in that analysis at the end of the day?
I don't recall exactly which one.
Well, I'll refresh your memory. Huntsville. Do you recall which base ranked second?
I don't recall.
Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska. You recall third, you probably don't, which was a joint base in San Antonio. Commander-in-Chief selected the location that the Air Force ranked number one. Yet since the President selected Huntsville, the location, the Air Force study ranked number one in January 2021, we've had 2 years of delay. And the world is on fire right now. We need to catch up. The Colorado delegation asked for an investigative report and the GAO report on the process. Ironic. Colorado wasn't even second or third, but they asked for a report. So when the GAO examined this process, they said, I'm going to quote here, the Redstone Arsenal ranked as the highest scoring location in the evaluation phase, the highest ranked location in the selection phase, and the location with the most advantages in the decision matrix. Air Force officials stated that the decision to identify Redstone Arsenal as a preferred location stemmed from Air Force analysis showing it was the strongest candidate location. So, you know, we've gone back and forth with this, and I know Secretary Kendall is going back and forth on it. Hopefully we get this done. Hopefully we get it done before your term's out. I know that we've got commercial people that are involved in this. I know commercial people are going to be hugely involved in Space Command in years and years to come. And we look forward to all of that coming together in one location in the very near future, and hopefully that's Huntsville. So, General, thank you for your service, really. Thank you for serving, what you've done for Space Command. You've been the only one there. You brought it from infancy. You've done a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.